In this webisode, is Bitcoin currently forming a symmetrical triangle identical to the 3-month symmetrical triangle that we saw and broke back to about 12.5 just a few weeks ago? We're going to be taking a look at symmetrical triangles as trend reversals, continuation patterns, the breakout time frame and when can we expect this actual breakout, and the breakout direction. And as well, we're going to talk about this Fibonacci level that we talked about last week and how we're still completely identical in terms of our current support, and if we move here, guys, what we expect for Bitcoin over the next few weeks. Oh wow, welcome back, you absolute crypto savages. In today's update, we're going to be talking about this very clear symmetrical triangle that it seems Bitcoin has been confirmed through to the bottom and through to the top on these charts. And we're going to be talking about specifically this pattern because it's an extremely interesting pattern. In fact, the last big breakout we had for Bitcoin was because of this pattern, right? We were in this pattern for about 3 months, and it looks as though this pattern is going to be exploding, absolutely rupturing from the inside out even sooner than that previous pattern, right? This is not the same size. It seems to be the exact same type of pattern, but just on a smaller time frame. Wow, so if you guys are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on those post notifications so you get updated when we upload new videos. And as well, if you want to enter for these ledgers, make sure to leave your comment below and make sure to subscribe, as it is for subscribers specifically. And without any further ado, guys, let's dump into this webisode. Dirty dumpage. So guys, before we get into the very short-term, very interesting patterns we're going to show you and some very interesting things about symmetrical triangles, I just wanted to highlight this because this is something we covered about a week ago, and it's extremely interesting, right? So our current levels for Bitcoin, you can see here, kind of have a marked where key resistance and hopefully key support now have turned. But if we just pull out the Fibonacci retracement here, guys, we're basically teetering and tottering between the 786 and the golden pocket, the 0.65 and the 618, which is the golden pocket. So basically these two levels right here, and currently we're trying to find support here. And if we go back to the last bull market, you can see basically the same thing happened here, right? Where we found resistance, the 786, and then we found support at the golden pocket and then bounce, right? So if we just zoom out and show you these charts side by side, you can see very identical. Let me actually go to the weekly, or the 2 weeks, so you can kind of see it more up close. Yeah, you can see basically resistance 786, support golden pocket, resistance 786, support golden pocket, and up. And guys, I'm not saying that's exactly what's going to happen now, but I think this is a very interesting similarity. If Bitcoin's current symmetrical triangle breaks to that target, then that could be an exact repeat of that. But we're going to be talking about what is more likely between these scenarios, right? If Bitcoin is actually more likely to break out to the upside here, or have a break down here, down to the downside, and with our actual target being exactly here if we did break to the downside, which would be even a longer term confirmation here. Wow, so while there are instances of symmetrical triangles that mark important trend reversals, they are more often actually a continuation of the current trend. Now the key thing here is to identify what exactly is our trend, right? So if we look on this chart, if we just take a very big zoom out, obviously it looks as though, if we're looking at this on very long term, it looks as though this is more to the upside, right? We got to break out of this very macro pattern, and we've been heading up. But if we just zoom in a little bit more, guys, the trend since the beginning of September, so over a month now, as of yesterday, over an entire month of trend price action, we've actually been setting lower highs, right? We have this high here. Actually, it goes back further than a month, but we have this high here, this lower high, and again, a lower high. So if we actually zoom in, we're actually in a downtrend, right? So does this mean if it's a continuation of a trend that will actually be breaking to the downside? Regardless of the nature of the pattern, a continuation or reversal, the direction of the next major move can only be determined after a breakout. And again, that seems kind of silly, but to put it simply, that is exactly how this pattern works. There are other patterns that are heavily favored to break out in a specific direction. For example, ascending triangles usually break out more to the upside. Descending triangles usually break out more to the downside. Symmetrical triangles are more of a tricky pattern, and this article actually gets into it more, but it's more about analyzing a lot of other factors. This pattern more is able to predict when the pattern will break out, more so than which direction the pattern will break out. But it does have some very interesting information on the direction as well. So the breakout time frame usually occurs halfway to 75% through the pattern's development or time span, and you can measure that by taking when it enters the pattern to the apex just being kind of when the two trend lines on the top and bottom kind of converge together, right? The tippy top, as you could say, the point. So for this current pattern, the apex is actually around about 2 weeks away. Okay, so actually, we'll be seeing a breakout before then, in my opinion. We'll see a breakout way before then. As this article even states, it usually happens halfway to 75%. And guys, if we look on this chart, this is about halfway, and this is about 75%. Let me redraw that. This is about 75%. So we're literally at the area where we could be seeing an actual breakout of this, and we most likely will. I don't think we'll be trading in this pattern like this until the middle of October. Okay, we're going to see this breakout usually before that. Now, with that being said, this pattern is kind of interesting because with our last symmetrical triangle, we actually almost did go all the way to the apex before getting a breakout. So that's something you want to keep in mind when we look at this. This is about a 3-month pattern, and we got, I want to say, like 95% to the apex before we broke out. Now that's a little unusual. I've been looking at symmetrical triangles for a while, and usually they do break out significantly before an apex. But again, this pattern that we saw break out at the very end of July actually did break out pretty much last minute, right? It broke out at the last possible moment. And again, there were a lot of other factors going into this. One of the biggest ones being, you guys see where it breaks out right here, right on this green line. If we zoom out, this green line is extremely significant, okay, because it's literally the top overhead resistance of the last 3 years. So that's why that was so significant, right? I think that's why it took so long. If we zoom in, again, there's a lot of stuff going on this chart. I can just take it away for a second here. But we had multiple resistance throughout this entire area. And if we, yeah, you can see here was resistance, here, and then right here was the last area. And again, that's why I think that this symmetrical triangle took so long to break out, because again, we have to factor in the entire macro setting, and we were underneath the biggest macro resistance in Bitcoin's current price structure for the last 3 years, right? So I think that is why this pattern was more delayed. But as you can see, guys, we're not within that anymore. We're now significantly above this symmetrical triangle on the very long term, and we have a different, smaller symmetrical triangle here. It also says here a break before halfway might be premature, and a break too close to the apex may be insignificant. And again, we actually saw that back here, right? We had this symmetrical triangle, and it was a pretty clear one pretty early on, but you can see this is about halfway of the symmetrical triangle, and you can see we tried breaking up right about here, and it ended up being premature. We basically just came back, revisited this, found support multiple times on the bottom, resistance multiple times on the top, and then eventually it did break out. So that actually held true there, that this one broke out prematurely, and it brought back in. So some people would look at this and say, you know, oh, well, this tried to break out. This is no longer valid. But it 100% still is valid, and it played out exactly as a symmetrical triangle would play out. Okay, you can get premature breakouts and fall back into it and then continue, which a lot of people think that isn't possible, but that happens kind of often. Wow, now with breakout direction, the future direction of the breakout can only be determined after the break has occurred. It sounds obvious, but attempting to guess the direction can be dangerous. Even though a continuation pattern is supposed to break in the direction of the long-term trend, it's not always the case. And again, this is where things get a little iffy here, because while I think this is super valuable in determining when we're going to see a massive return to volatility, and even if we return, let's actually look at this and pull out the volume here, guys. Look at this volume. I think we're actually in store for another break very, very soon. So a very big return to volatility like we saw with the break back in March of 2019 out of that ascending triangle, even with the massive dump at the beginning of March. That was probably the biggest volume we'll see because of exactly what happened in the global markets and everything. But again, we are seeing smaller and smaller volume, and usually kind of around this area is where we've seen in the past is where a return to volatility happens here, right around between these levels. As you can see here, this is about as low as we go in terms of volume before we get a big volume spike and a return to volume, as you can see multiple times here. So we're definitely in store for a massive breakout here, and very, very, very soon, which is why I think this is valuable. The only thing that's a little undetermined right now is the exact direction, which unfortunately symmetrical triangles don't give you a lot of information on exactly which direction. But there is something interesting to speculate here, and that's that if we would get a break down, okay, and we can just measure that from the very beginning of where the pattern starts, let's say that we get the break fairly soon, that would basically bring us roughly back down to our very, very key 3-year resistance of that entire macro symmetrical triangle, right around like the $92 to even $9,000 level. At the very lowest, about 88 or 8,700, which is a target we've also been talking about. So if that did happen, that would be the biggest macro test before blast off. If we found support there, that would be mega bullish to everyone, because again, guys, if we zoom out and just show you on this chart, a retest of a macro pattern like this, it would look something like that. Actually a little bit higher. Even to that 50-week moving average, that can be considered a very strong retest before entering up, because again, there's two prevailing things right now. On the very, very macro, it looks as though we're in a breakout, even though we've had weeks and weeks of lower highs now. But again, if we do zoom into that more daily chart, you see the current trend of the last few weeks, ever since really towards the end of August. it's been lower highs, and that's kind of been the trend now. So ultimately, the trend in general on these longer term charts is seeming to move up, because technically we still have higher lows on this long term chart. If we zoom in, technically we have lower highs on this chart. So again, there's so much uncertainty. Guys, this is without a doubt one of the most exciting times in crypto, and it's kind of ironic because views across the space are kind of down right now. People are kind of bored because we have been trading sideways. But we have some of the biggest news that I've ever seen. This year has been wild. We have, I mean, I'm not even going to go into the news because I'm sure you guys are already very aware of what's happening here in the US, which is very influential in a lot of these markets. But it's absolutely insane though. Guys, even though we're looking at Bitcoin TA, we have to factor in like at this point, dozens of other things that are happening around the globe and also in the US specifically, because there's some very, very insane stuff happening. Wow, and if you guys are interested in trying to trade this market, make sure to sign up below. You get some very nice deposit bonuses. Trading fee reductions 20% currently, but only if you have experience trading and if you want to support the channel. And as well, we have 4 updated videos coming to the TA section of T4. We want to update all of those videos, so we have about 10 more to go. But yeah, if you're interested in joining to learn TA trading and following along with my portfolio, make sure to use code BILLIONS to get 10% off at checkout.